Good morning, Team Brandy. Welcome to this week's Tuesday for the 12th. I'm Brandy Fluker-Oakley, and I'm a candidate for state representative of the Suffolk 12th District, which covers most of Mattapan and parts of Dorchester, Hyde Park, and Milton. I am so excited to be joined today by Pilar Tucker, who is going to talk with us about a very important issue related to mental health. I often like to say that we are in a double pandemic right now. COVID-19 is still real. It is still ravaging our country and certainly the Black community. And in addition, we also are experiencing so much uprising and protests related to Black Lives Matter in the wake of so many shootings of unarmed Black and brown persons in the recent weeks that have been documented and filmed. And even that within itself, not just the news of it, but even seeing it can add an additional layer of trauma to our psyche. So I wanted to make sure that we were able to have a conversation, and I'm so happy to be joined by Pilar Tucker. For those who are not familiar with her work, she's a mental health therapist, clinical psychology doctoral candidate, and the founder and CEO of Empower Our Crown. For the past decade, Pilar has been a strong proponent of mental health, wellness, and leadership. Her life mission is to empower communities across the globe to become mentally and emotionally competent world changers by bridging the gap between mental health, wellness, leadership, and leadership development. While in her doctoral program, Pilar is advancing her clinical expertise by focusing on global mental health. Through this research, advocacy, policy, and application, she is dedicated to enhancing the mental wellness and leadership in vulnerable populations, particularly women and girls and communities of color across the globe. Pilar truly believes that your mental health is your wealth and that we can change the trajectory of our lives if we become the CEO of our personal life. So please join me in welcoming Pilar Tucker. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me this morning.
Absolutely, Brandy. I'm so thankful for being on your platform today and just really supporting this conversation of mental health because it's so integral during this time that we're talking about, the wellness of our country and our communities.
Yeah. And speaking of, please, can you share with us why is this conversation so important right now in this moment?
Well, it's so important right now for several reasons, but the major reason is that our mental health is impacted greatly by all of the travesties that have been going on in the world, especially with COVID-19. We're still dealing with a lot of the death and mourning of that and trying to, get back into our norm, quote unquote. And now with the height of our racial culture, just the racial injustices, the police brutality, and the constant evilness, truthfully, that has been going on in our world, our mental health is impacted significantly. There have been so many suicide rates going up lately. People have been reporting high levels of depression and anxiety, and it has been overwhelming and alarming because of the impact that these crises have really brought to our country and our communities.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that information. And I think what's interesting to note is part of your mission is particularly to focus on communities of color as well as women and girls. And here in the Suffolk 12th, we are a district that is predominantly people of color, although we are racially diverse for sure. It's mainly people of color here in the district. And I know that often in communities of color, there's this stigma around mental health. And then when you even layer on the faith-based community to that as well, that can be a whole nother layer of not wanting to seek out professional support in times of need. Can you just speak a little bit around the stigma that's often in communities of color surrounding mental health?
Absolutely. So there is an alarming rate of stigma in mental health of color and communities of color because what historically we have been people who have really refrain from discussing mental health and mental illness because, like you said, our faith has been a integral part of our communities and our survival. And also the negative connotation that mental illness holds when we're talking about, depression and anxiety and stress. We've typically been people historically who have really diminished and dismissed the significance of those terms, and we've associated with them with disease. So because we associate them with disease, we experience dis-ease when it comes to mental health. So we pray about it. We are going to church about it, which is great. That's something that I do, but faith without works is dead. So what happens is that we are stigmatizing mental health and, saying that, you're just sad, you'll be okay. We're kind of minimizing the severity of it and trying to incorporate this faith and not working on, minimizing those illnesses that really impact all people, no matter the color, no matter the race, ethnicity, or demographic background.
Yeah, I think that's so real. And even hearing you speak, what came to mind for me is just how for so long and so often Black women are portrayed as strong. Black women, I can remember hearing conversations in years past where it's like, oh, mental health, depression, that's a white woman's, illness, as if, Black women couldn't particularly experience that in the community. And I also think about, the notions of masculinity and maleness within as well. And even for our brothers out there who might be in need of some mental health counseling, but feeling as though it doesn't make them a quote unquote man, right? Or it's not that's not what grown men do type thing, which also, to your point, I love the disease causing dis-ease within our communities and seeking those services. I also think oftentimes folks think that only in times of need or crisis, like what we're experiencing right now with all of the impact of the pandemic and also Black Lives Matter, is the time to seek counseling. Can you break it down for us, not only seeking counseling in times of high stress and trauma, like what we're in now, but also in the mundane day-to-day areas of life as well?
Absolutely. So it is statistically, Black and Brown communities experience a higher level of stress on a day-to-day basis, even without crises being, forcefully imparted on our daily activity right now. So what happens is that we are experiencing these high levels of stress even outside of crises that sometimes we're dismissing because of the strong Black woman, persona that we take on, or the men can't cry persona that our Black and Brown men take on. And we're avoiding taking care of our mental wellness. And we have to be very intentional in building that psychological and spiritual fortitude before crises arise, because if we're able to build it before, we're fully equipped when crises arise to know how to, work on those illnesses.
Yeah, absolutely. It's often true, and I have heard this from many constituents, particularly when they have come to the point of recognizing, yes, I do actually want to seek support. I do want to reach out to a professional. And there's often barriers to access.
Yeah.
Of course, healthcare is such a big theme, especially in the wake of COVID. We've seen those inequities only exacerbated for communities of color and low income communities as well. And I'm just wondering, what are the routes that folks can take in order to get access to professionals, whether it's through insurance or some other channel or mechanism?
I know that insurance, that barrier is one of the biggest that kind of goes along with the stigma that is carried with mental health. So that prevents people from wanting to seek it. But now, especially in these times of virtual access, there are many free resources that people can access on the internet. There are many free resources that people can access in their local communities, and there are many resources that people can have readily available to them, whether that's through like therapyforblackmen.org. That's something that is a platform that is specifically for Black men, or therapyforblackgirls.org. That is a free resource that is for Black and Brown communities that are really experiencing challenges with their mental wellness. And sometimes people aren't ready for therapy. So that also gives them another opportunity. Some of these resources, Melanated and Mental Health, there's so many that are free and available on the internet that you can access without going to therapy necessarily.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those resources, particularly the group therapy resources. I can recall several many years ago dating a guy, and I remember telling him, "You need to go to therapy." Like, not because he was a bad person, but there was just some underlying stuff from childhood
Mhm.
trauma that needed to be worked out, amongst other things. And of
Right,
course, he scoffed at me and said, "Oh no, like therapy," leaned on the
right,
things, all the things that you mentioned previously. That relationship ended. Fast forward, we're still friends. They relocated to another city and ended up finding a men's therapy group in that city.
wow,
And it's like, I don't know why I had reported back to me. I don't know why I waited so long. And so I think
right,
the power of group therapy is really beneficial, because oftentimes, whether it's because we feel like we have to be strong or we feel like we can't
right,
cry, and I know particularly in my family ancestry, this whole suffer in silence
yeah,
mentality and theme is so pervasive and so
hmm,
strong throughout the community that I don't even think we realize the benefit
right,
of being in community while we're working through our stuff. And so,
right.
Pilar, can you just share a little bit with us about some of the benefits of group therapy compared to individual therapy, just as folks are trying to weigh and explore their options?
Absolutely. And I love that you brought up the suffer in silence. I think historically we have suffered in silence because when we do speak, we are either killed, we are either, dismissed, and our voice doesn't typically matter when we speak up. So that suffering in silence has a long history and impact and prevalence in our communities because of what happens when we do speak up. So community therapy, group therapy, support groups are really essential for Black and Brown communities because, like church, it gives you this communal bond. It gives you a validation that you are not in this alone. It gives you the confirmation that we are a village, that we are not, we don't have to talk about this just to a therapist, which is great. I'm a therapist and I love when people come to me, but there's other ways that you can talk about it amongst people that you trust, people that look like you, and people who can confirm and understand the history that you've been through and can attest to your story. And being in that group dynamics in general, you think about sisterhoods, you think about sororities and fraternities, you think about even in your family how important it is, family meals, how close you all get, family reunions. Those group settings really enhance our well-being and our emotional wellness entirely, individually and collectively.
Thank you so much for that, Pilar. And if someone were deciding between group therapy and individual counseling, what are some of the pros of the individual counseling model?
Sure. So people who are searching for therapy and really want to have a more focused, person centered therapy, they should seek individual therapy because the therapist will really be committed to developing a therapy model, a regimen that will help that individual. Like if you are, for example, it's not just a racial thing, and we're all Black and Brown communities are experiencing racial trauma right now. If you're experiencing something more specific like depression, like anxiety, like any other negative emotions that you're experiencing, then that therapist is able to work specifically with you and develop a routine or a model that can help you reach your specific goals. With group therapy, say it is a race-based trauma therapy setting, you are able to talk about something as a collective that you're all experiencing at once. So the model is more communal and it's more inclusive to the general topic of race or the general topic of anxiety, because they have anxiety group therapy, but it's not as specific to the individual. So it's more specific to the overall population.
That is so helpful. Thank you for that delineation between the two, and the pros, should one be trying to decide whether to do group or individual counseling.
Yeah.
Pilar, as you were speaking, this thought came to me, and it relates to a conversation that I've had with a constituent. For those who don't know, I used to be a public defender here in the city of Boston, and we are all familiar with terms like the school to prison pipeline. We're
Mhm.
all familiar with the over incarceration of Black and Brown peoples, particularly men, throughout this country. And in having this conversation with a constituent, what came up was what seems to be our nation's over reliance on incarceration compared to treatment, in
Mhm.
particular counseling and mental health support services. And I'm just curious to know your vantage point. And I realized I did not ask you this previously, so this is kind of off cuff here.
That's
What
okay.
what are your thoughts, or how have you seen, if at all, in your practice, the benefits of treatment instead of penalization and incarceration with folks?
That's a great question. And I believe treatment should be the first stop because you have to understand that people are going to be exposed to external factors such as community violence. They're going to be in predicaments where sometimes their psyche is not taken care of. And I personally do not believe that incarceration is the first step. You have to really understand what that person is going through, what is in their community, what external factors are impacting their well-being, and then how can you work on those first before penalizing them for many times things that weren't in their control. We're in a system where there are a lot of mishaps and you know implications in the system that happen, especially with Black and brown people, Black and brown men, where they're pretty much written off before they have a chance to even express themselves, before they're even having a chance to, defend themselves. So they find themselves incarcerated and dealing with the depression and the anxiety and the stressors in jail instead of in a mental health institution. So we have to really be mindful of what the person is going through individually. Who are they around? Are they impoverished? Are they dealing with single parent homes? What are the factors that play a part into these external behaviors that the society deems as negative? Address what's happening in the home, in the community first, so we can mitigate the future potential problems or minimize the incarceration that I feel that has just perpetuated our society's, one, racism, and two, systematic oppression.
Yeah. Oh, Pilar, you are a woman after my own heart in trying to address the root causes. I feel like often, and I don't use this terminology loosely, that we just tend to put band-aids on gunshot wounds as it comes
Mm,
to solving for challenges within our community. And I truly believe in addressing the root causes. And so much of what you just shared is why I think there needs to be a re-evaluation of the state hospitals that were closed, that were
yeah,
providing that treatment to folks who were involved with our criminal justice system, and really making sure that we are addressing the root causes. So thank you so
right.
much for sharing
Absolutely.
that. So
Absolutely.
as you know, and I mentioned this at the opening, we are in this double pandemic, right? We have the COVID-19, and then we are also battling Black Lives Matter and trying to make sure that we are still treated equal. Can you talk to me a little bit about what does mental health look like, not only during this era of
Yeah.
pandemic, but also beyond?
Yeah. So mental health and beyond, especially in communities of color, has been something that is a struggle. It's been a struggle because of the perpetuation of these personas that we adapt just to survive. I think mental health has been a band-aid. It has been seen as a band-aid. You only get it if you are in desperate need. So sometimes we're waiting until the very last minute to get this help because of the stigma, because of the shame, because of the guilt, because of the just negative association that we have with the illness. So mental health is going to be very important beyond the crises to address as it is a physical problem. When you're feeling sick, when you're feeling like you have the flu, you go to the doctors immediately. You still go to the doctors even without the flu. You go to the doctors to have your physical checkups. You go to your doctors to just make sure that your wellness is taken care of. We have to treat mental health just the same. We have to make sure that we're getting regular checkups, whether that's in therapy, group supports, community conversations, tapping into our resources that are free, because I know access is a major problem. We have to do that on a daily basis, because if we're able to take care of our mental health on a daily basis, when crises comes, it's going to be easy to be fully equipped and ready to, kind of go through the crisis and overcome it.
Pilar, thank you so much for sharing that. And it also makes me wonder, let's say in the short term, until someone's able to get access to a professional, whether in a group or individual setting, what are some things that as individuals we can do to try to maintain our mental health and wellness in this time?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And for me, this is what I always say to my clients and my audience. You have to do what works well for you. As long as it's healthy and it's for your wellness and it's enhancing your well being, that's good. So I encourage and challenge people to develop their own coping skills toolbox. And in that coping skills toolbox, for me, I have God. So that's the first thing I put in my coping skills toolbox. So I know I'm praying every single day, even when I don't want to, even when I'm angry with God, I'm praying, and then it's what are you going to do to work on your mind, your mental, because faith without works is dead. So you have to really make sure that you are treating your mind well. So for me, I'm reading, you're activating those brain cells and you're getting that mental stimulation that is very necessary for you to have your knowledge, because knowledge is power. And then you want to do things like deep breathing. Meditation is so key. And it is, research proves that meditation and mindfulness decreases stress significantly. So that's the deep breathing. That's something that you can do for free. Breath is so sacred, but we have to be intentional in how we're controlling our breath. So breathing from your diaphragm and being in control of your breath. That's 5 deep breaths you're taking before you're going into that meeting, before you're going into that job interview, before you're cooking for your family for dinner tonight. That is breathing. And then another thing I like to do is writing, journaling, really talking to yourself in that safe space about everything that's going on, so you release it. If you're not ready to tell a friend about what you're going through, or you're not ready to tell your pastor what you're going through, or you're not ready or cannot access therapy, guess what? Your therapy can be that pen to paper, because science proves that when we do pen to paper, then we also are improving our well-being. It's a mental stimulation that we get. And then move your body. I always say we have to be moving. Exercise is key. Exercise is so key in our wellness. We have to exercise, go dance, walk, run, get outside, get some fresh air, that vitamin D. The breeze needs you. So those are a few things that you can do for free every day, and they are proven by research and proven by just me doing them, that they really help enhance your overall well-being.
Pilar, thank you so much for sharing those. And 2 of them I just want to highlight. Well, maybe 3. I might highlight all of them. We'll see. One is this morning. So I'm a member of the Dorchester Y, and of course, with the pandemic, we haven't been able to go into the facility. But my yoga instructor was able to get a Zoom account, so I've been doing virtual yoga at 7 a.m. And I'm not gonna lie, this morning when my body was waking up about 6:15, 6:30, I said to myself, I really could just like stay in this bed a little bit longer and sleep.
Mm-hmm.
But I forced myself to go, and I was so grateful that
Right.
your point of moving the body and clearing the mind. And it doesn't have to be yoga. Sometimes I
Right.
go for a run. My good friend last night was telling me how they've committed, they're out in Brooklyn and New York, how they've committed to going for an hour walk every morning just through their
Right.
neighborhood as a way to kind of like de-stress and let out some of that toxic energy. So
Mm-hmm.
the movement of the body in whatever way works for folks, I think is so powerful. And thank you for
Absolutely.
reminding us of that. And as you were talking about the deep breaths, I started to do deep breaths while you were
Yeah.
speaking. Oh yes, I forgot how calming this is in the
So
power of
common.
that as well. And I had the opportunity last week to spend some time with middle schoolers, 6th through 8th graders at the St. John Paul II school right down in Lower Mills. And the activity they had done was to write future letters to themselves, or to
Yeah.
write letters to their future selves. And a few of the students read them. And to the point of journaling and writing to yourself, it was, I think, a powerful exercise for them. But then to hear their reflections
Right.
and what they're processing in this moment was also so powerful. So if it works for middle schoolers, it certainly will work
It
for
can
us
work for us.
because the children certainly are our future. And of course, I share the same faith practice as you in terms of
Yeah.
prayer, and whether it's meditation, no matter what it is, I think it's always good just to take that time to reflect. So thank you you called it the mental wellness toolkit. What did you call
Yep.
this?
The
Exactly.
mental wellness toolbox.
Yes, the mental wellness toolbox. Thank you so
Mhm.
much for
Of
that.
course.
I hope folks think about what they can put in their mental wellness toolbox, especially
Mhm.
in these times. And
Yeah.
then, we talk about COVID. I know many of us have participated in some of the protests by marching or gathering at rallies or getting involved in other ways.
Mhm.
Any additions or special tips and tricks for that particular moment in time that you would add to the mental wellness toolbox?
Absolutely. I think advocacy is going to be the very thing that helps promote and create this change that we're seeking. However, I know that it can get very overwhelming. I've participated in the protests, and it gives you this empowering feeling that change is going to come. And it also allows you to then join with your community to fight for a common goal. However, I know that it can be very alarming for us when we are constantly exposed to the hashtags, when we're constantly told that another Black or brown body is taken by law enforcement, by the lawlessness of law enforcement.
Mm.
So I always encourage people to be mindful and really take your breaks. You have to take your own mental breaks. And that just means, saying sometimes, no, I can't go on this protest today. I need to limit my time that I'm spending on social media or watching the news, because these headlines are triggering, because the headlines can just re-expose you to the traumatic events that we're experiencing as a whole. So we have to really know our limits. Knowledge is power, but also knowing your limits creates that power to be utilized in the way that you see fit. So we have to be intentional. Intentionality breeds productivity, breeds wellness. It's just very important that we are being intentional during this time, and saying that it's okay to take breaks. It doesn't make you less of an activist or an advocacy person if you say no today. So the power of no is going to be important in finding your yes for the future.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Pilar. Thank you so, so much for that. Any closing thoughts or any summation you'd like to share before we part for today?
Sure. So I just really would love for our communities to be well. And I know that it's hard to be well in the midst of so many different crises and so many different pandemics that sometimes we've been facing even before COVID hit, even before, this injustices were filmed. But if we aren't well, change will not be able to manifest in the way that we pray for, in the way that we fight for, in the way that we advocate for. So it's really going to be imperative during this time to be well for you so you can be well for others. We can't pour into an empty cup. And the more that we try to, the less we'll have to share with the world. We were all given gifts. So use your gifts to do good, to give justice, and to create change. And thank you, Brandy.
Oh, thank you, Pilar. And I love that closing thought. Give from the overflow. You got to fill your cup up first
Mhm.
before you can pour out to others. Before you can give 100%, you have to be 100%. So thank you so much for that. Pilar, how can people get in touch with you or reach out to you if they have any further questions or want to follow up or maybe even use you for some of your counseling services?
Absolutely. So you can follow me on my business page, that at Empower Our Crown. And you can also follow me on my personal page on Instagram, because I have all my websites connected to my pages, at Dr. Tucker, PilarTucker. And you'll be able to subscribe to our website and really just follow me as I'm going on my journey of wellness and leadership globally.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pilar. And thank you, everyone, for joining this edition of Tuesdays for the 12th. I hope you got some news you can use, as they say. And I look forward to sharing more resources with you throughout the coming weeks in Tuesday for the 12th. And if you have any questions for me, please don't hesitate to reach out at Team Brandy 617 across Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you so much, Pilar. So grateful for your time today.
Thank you.